Hello, and welcome to the Retirement Income Institute Fellows Corner. I'm Jason Fickner, the Executive Director of the Retirement Income Institute. Today, we're turning the tables, and I get to be the interviewer on the RRI Fellows Corner. I am pleased to have my colleague and host of the Fellows Corner, Suzanne Norman, here today to talk about her work both as an education fellow and as an executive coach. Suzanne spent over 3 decades in the investment industry and brings a unique, holistic perspective to our work at the Institute. She has held roles serving large institutional clients as well as individual retail investors. Whether it was helping bring a new investment product to market or making sure a consumer understood the impact of ownership, Suzanne has always had a deep passion for financial education, especially when it comes to helping women. We are grateful to have her here as a spokesperson and for the papers she has contributed to the Institute. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you, Jason. Great to be here.
So we're in what we call the peak 65 zone right now, where 4.1 million Americans are turning 65 every year beginning in 2024 and continuing through 2027. That's 11,200 people a day on average turning 65. You've seen a lot behind the scenes in the retirement marketplace and a lot of front stage with consumers. What are some of the things that most concern you as we enter the peak of peak 65?
Yes, there are so many. I would say there are three that come to mind immediately, and the first being financial literacy or lack thereof in the United States, and I would extend that to the world as well. A lot of it is because we don't get it in school. One of the things that I track every year is the Council of Economic Education. And what they report is that we still see very few states, only about half are requiring a personal finance or economics class for people to graduate high school. So we have a gap. And that concerns me as an American, as a person, because we're setting people up for failure. The second thing that I think about a lot is, of course, this communication gap. I have my undergraduate degree in psychology, so everyone always thought that was interesting being in the investment industry, but it has served me quite well. I'm always curious, and one of the things that we've seen, certainly in our research, as you know, Jason, is that when we study what is being said and what is being heard, there are these big gaps. And I know it's not for lack of trying. I think some of it will talk, maybe I have some ideas coming up. But one of the things that struck me last year in the protected retirement income planning study that we produced is that when advisors were asked how often they were having, "What are you planning to do in retirement?" conversations, 70% said that they were having that frequently with their investors and their clients, but only 29% of those clients said they were hearing that. The other thing, and we'll talk about this, of course, with women as well, is that when the topic of long-term care, we were asking them if they talked about that frequently, and they said about 55% of the time they were having that conversation, but the investors said they only heard that 18% of the time. And then caregiving, of course, for women, that's another big one. About 38% of the time, the advisors said they were talking about it, but the consumer investors said only 13% of the time. So these are things that concern me with that communication gap, especially with things complex like retirement. And then, of course, the last one you mentioned already is my passion around women, educating them, making sure they feel empowered. I obviously, as a coach, say I can't give you power, but I can help you find it. And one of the things, as you mentioned, in 30 years of being in this client facing role, I've probably delivered over 1,000 presentations, many of them public. And when I would finish, most women would come up to me and, first of all, confess their vulnerability and that they really didn't feel equipped to manage their financial lives, particularly investing. The other thing they also always typically said was that they love seeing a woman talk knowledgeably or have some knowledge around this. So I really do follow the maxim, you have to see it to be it. So those are the three things that I think about every day.
Wow, those are great key issues. So let's dive a little further then. What do you see as some of the solutions to solving these problems?
Well, I guess first I will sort of give a shout out to the Alliance for Lifetime Income. With my prior corporate life, we were a founding member, and I've been along this journey since 2018. I am so passionate about this ability that we've had to fill this gap related to education as a 501c6. And of course, your language around the research that we have, pracademic research that we've given, and we have close to 130 research papers. But beyond that, we also produce so much education material, independent thinking, for the consumer and the financial professional. So the Alliance for Lifetime Income really stands in a unique position to help solve this literacy gap. The other thing you've heard me talk about a lot is that I, again, want to walk the talk, and I began my financial literacy education, contributing my time as a volunteer back in 2016, and I now serve as the co-chair of CFA Society Boston's Financial Literacy Initiative. My message here is that we have, depending on how you measure it, probably 1 million advisors I looked at the Department of Labor for a paper I wrote a while back. Anyway, we can be the change. And so I do have a call out to all of my financial professional friends that you can step into this space and help solve the gap. It could be as simple as demystifying a complex concept. It could be talking about how to budget. But as Americans, I think that if we can participate in helping create better outcomes financially, that helps individuals, that helps our society. And then the last shout out I would give is, of course, one of our scholars who is one of my idols, Anna Maria Lusardi. She is world renowned for her financial literacy research. So I would just mention, for everybody who hasn't seen her papers at the Institute, take a look. We have a new one coming out this spring. So those are some thoughts related to financial literacy solutions. Next on my concerns, I mentioned, of course, the communication gap. Frank Luntz is known for saying, what you say isn't always what they hear, or something along those lines. And so, again, as I mentioned, I do think that it's not for lack of trying, but we do tend to sort ourselves as human beings. And I think because we have these different cohorts of financial professionals, the insiders, we've got the consumer, we've got, manufacturers, there's just all these different languages out there. So the thing that I often talk about is when we have the glossary at the Alliance for Lifetime Income. One of the other things specific to the retirement income conversation that I think about is that it's this interesting intersection of mortality and money. And it's fraught, right? People are very concerned when they start thinking about this. So if an advisor can think of themselves more as a therapist, I think that helps. We also have another education fellow, another hero of mine, Richard Leiter, whose work became the basis of this Find Your Purpose, Fund Your Purpose. So if we can really remember the emotions that are happening for people during the retirement planning process, I think we have a much better chance to have better outcomes. So the last, of course, and not least, is the work that I have around women. I've written 4 papers for the Institute. I led a series of papers cross collaboration at my last company, which I'm very proud of. But at the end of the day, when we start thinking about helping women, the thing that I want everyone to remember, whether it is you are a woman or you're an advisor serving women, is that it's not one size fits all. That's the first thing that I think people make a mistake at. The market is unique. Everyone's a fingerprint, as I say. So having this ability to meet people where they are, I think, is really critical. Qualitative, open-ended questions, that kind of connects to the communication gap as well. I think we do talk a little bit more than we think we do, and making sure that we have the what, why, how questions, starting off just and then stopping, just listening. One of the things that again, I'm very proud the Alliance has produced is a how to interview a financial advisor. So for women, particularly thinking about retirement, making sure you know what questions to ask, because it's not just their competence that you're looking for, it's the fit. The other thing is, when an advisor is working with women in a couple, if it's a traditional male-female couple, female-female, whatever kind of couple we're talking about, make sure everybody has equal time. People want to be seen and they want to be heard. The other thing is that I mentioned the financial therapist, and given my background in psychology, all of the things that I think about qualitatively, it did prompt me to think, okay, it's not just about money, right? It's about this financial empowerment in general. And it actually prompted me to create a series that I call the Wealthy Woman. And it's this idea of wealth and health and that intersection because it goes just beyond picking investments. It's how do I negotiate better for a salary? How do I think about this new purpose? And Richard and I wrote a paper last year, which I'm again proud of because we've talked about finding your purpose, funding your purpose, but also this idea, as you mentioned, Peak 65. And there are going to be identity shifts for everybody.
Fantastic. And we have a new product you might want to talk about by one of our research fellows, Chris High. How could people use that? And so I'd ask you to talk about that for a minute. And also one other last sort of wrap-up question. What can we do to help get more women interested in being professional financial advisors?
Great. Thanks, Jason. First and foremost, thank you to Chris High. Chris is an amazing research fellow. Been lucky to work with him. In fact, his company is WealthCare, which gave me the idea of creating the Wealthy Woman programming. What he created is a wonderful personal assistant we call Allie. If you go to protectedincome.org, you'll see her at the top. Oh, I do make her a female, but she's at the top. You can ask her any questions. What I love about what Chris has done is he has created a closed system for AI, for this ability for us to take all of these research papers, all of the educational material. So it's more likely to be accurate because I know sometimes when we think about using personal assistants in AI, we do wonder sometimes, are we getting the right information? But because it is all peer reviewed and it's been created in this tight system, Allie is something I would encourage people to look at. And then as far as women coming into the business, it's probably a longer conversation, but the first thing I would reflect back on is my comment, see it to be it. When I got into the business back in 1992, I always say it was a unique entry point because I was coming into a bank environment, although it was the brokerage division at Wells Fargo. But the woman that I became her sales associate was one of the top brokers, and the office was half women. And the sales manager was a woman. And I came in from, again, having a undergraduate degree in psychology. I really didn't have any knowledge of what this industry looked like. We still persistently are about 80-20, 80% men, 20% women. That does not mean, by the way, I say it all the time, that we don't have wonderful male allies. Men can serve women very well. But when I think about all of the qualities that we're looking for, particularly in this peak 65, this transition of wealth that we're seeing, women's longevity, making sure that women actually see more women in this business that are perhaps displaying a little bit more empathy. We know that science says that we have that sort of uniquely, innately, but I think that this is a call to action, and I really believe that more women in this business, they will enjoy it, they will help people, and they will create really solid business results for themselves. So it's a great time to come into this business as a woman.
Well, that's a great way to end this. So thank you for those wonderful insights, Suzanne, and thank you for letting me sit on the other side of the interview table today and interview you. You can find more of Suzanne's thought leadership and research on our website at protectedincome.org. And Suzanne will look forward to seeing you soon on another Fellows Corner. Thanks, Suzanne.